The Classic Tetris World Championships 2021 qualifiers were off the charts in terms of score, and all the brackets are in. They're absolutely nuts. My name is David, aka aGameScout, and I am very privileged to be joined by the Classic Tetris Gauntlet host, the silver bracket host this year, and for the very first time, he's going to be on commentary for the gold bracket, Michael, aka It's Sharky. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on again, Scout. It's going to be amazing just diving into all these brackets.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just jump in. Group A, we have Nenu versus Knight, Jesper versus Dan V, Red Shirt versus Eyeball, and HydrantDude versus Luis in the very first round. There's already so many heavy hitters in this bracket alone.
I think it's kind of cool how it's kind of split. You have 4 of your players that played in 2020, and then you have 4 brand new players to gold in 2021, like Knight, Dan V, Eyeball, and Luis. Looking at this, I think the one that a lot of people are expecting to happen out of this bracket is Nenu versus Hydrant. I believe Nenu, finished 3rd place in 2020, and Hydrant, he has the current highest score at like 1.6 million, and he got that in a competitive game.
Yeah, I mean, there's no chance for your opponent to win if you drop a 1.6 million. But it is really interesting in that, I mean, it doesn't happen every game. 2 major rollers in this bracket. You got HydrantDude, and then you also have Jesper, aka Tegamek. He was rolling for most of his qual. He was showing off, digging up way up high all the time on 18 and 19. So rolling can get you out of crazy situations, but it's not quite at the point yet where rollers are scoring like major points every single time on kill screen. So yeah, the bracket still has lots of options. I know Nenu mentioned he really wants to win CTWC 2021. It's a serious goal for him. He has a great shot of winning this bracket if he can pull off, a victory in a close match or 2.
Yeah, definitely him versus Knight. He's the favorite there, but him versus Jesper or Dan V, the winner of that. If it's versus Jesper, I think that match will be very interesting if that does happen. And then probably he would want to play anyone but HydrantDude to go into the bracket finals.
Dan V is a really interesting first-time player. I know him mainly as the guy who had like this long winning streak and just has like this crazy win-loss record in comp. I guess he just must be insanely consistent.
Yeah. I mean, he played in Gauntlet. He played for the Bees, even though they didn't have a fantastic season. But he was a Gauntlet All-Star, and he was able to beat Ruins, or Richie as he's called, in one of his games, just because Richie unfortunately had an early top out. But he also, Dan Vinky was getting like consistent 900s.
And then Red Shirt versus Eyeball. But both of these players to me are so special. Like you got Eyeball, the Super Mario Brothers speedrunner, who is really, really good at NES Tetris. Like, you can't just be a scrub. If you're getting into the top 64, you need multiple max outs. You need to be like absolutely cracked nowadays. And he's going up against Red Shirt, who has been to the CTWC for more years than pretty much any other team that's in the scene. Yeah. Because he lives in Oregon, he was able to be at the CTWC back in 2017, before even Joseph Saelee. He was like 11 years old back then. A fan watching all these players, and now he's one of the top dogs. I can't imagine how that feels.
Honestly, I think this matchup is probably the most even matchup out the bracket. They're both really close to each other in PBs. They're both fast tappers, and they deservedly got their spot here. Even though, their seeds say otherwise, I think that this is that's probably the closest matchup we'll see. Just, starting out. Who do you have winning this bracket if you were just to put a name to it?
It's really tough. I mean, I guess Nenu would probably be like a conservative, safe option. HydrantDude has perhaps the highest potential, though I know he's gone back and forth about the consistency of his rolling. Some, weeks and days, his rolling is just phenomenal, out of this world. And then other days, he reports that he's having issues or is struggling. Like even in the match where he got 1.6, he had an early top out right before then, and he was saying, "Oh man, this is like my worst day of rolling ever in like the past month." I don't know quite what to expect to him. I know the ceiling is like top of the world, but perhaps Nenu would be like the safe bet.
I definitely would pick in between either Nenu or Hydrant. But I won't discount any of the players because anything can happen and a player can make, a fantastic run.
Yeah, Nenu would know a thing or two about players making fantastic runs.
Yeah. So for Group B, we have Meme, Blank, Corion, Nerds, Stone, Sam Finch, Richie, and Terrence. Honestly, just reading out all those names alone is kind of terrifying.
There's no weak players this year. Sam Finch, it's cool to see him back. Wasn't sure if he was going to compete again. He signed up at the last minute. Corion versus Nerds. I saw Corion talking.
Hold on, isn't that a rematch from what happened last year? I'm pretty sure a Corion versus Nerds match happened last year.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, Corion versus Nerds. Because I saw Corion talking on Twitter. Corion said he's going to do his best to go for the win. But yeah, I mean, Nerds is, no slouch.
I mean, the guy skipped 1.2 to get his first 1.3, so.
Then you got Dead Meme, who blasted through the Minnesota qualifier like it was nothing. Against Blank, famous or perhaps infamous, he developed a little contraption to help with rolling. I don't think he's managed to play with it on a high level yet, but he did start a conversation about what sort of tools might be permitted or not permitted in CTWCs going forward, and if, extra contraptions might be part of the strategy. So he's not using it this CTWC, but it will be, potentially a factor in future comp. Vandweller said it's going to be allowed in CTM if he can get it to work. So we'll see.
Down at the bottom, that's what is going to be interesting. Stone, he had a fantastic qualifier. I haven't seen him play yet, but he's going to be going up against Sam Finch. But Richie versus Terrence. It's funny because both of these players are actually teammates in Gauntlet.
Oh, really?
And they were both Seed 1 and Seed 2 for their teams underneath their team captain. So they're having to play each other. Honestly, with how Richie played in his quals and with how he played towards the end of the season, he's consistent. His one major thing about his gameplay is his adjustments. And that has been, since the beginning of the season, he nails his adjustments and they're always insane.
Are Richie's adjustments, would you say his ability to roll really quickly allows him to make across the board adjustments at a much later time than a typical player would?
Yeah, I mean, he was even doing cross map adjustments when he was a tapper, because when he had his first competitive match back in January, he was still a tapper. And it wasn't until Cheese, publicly revealed rolling and you made your video that he picked up rolling. And then shortly after, I believe 3 weeks in rolling, he got around 270,000 from level 29.
Yeah, I remember when that video dropped and it was just holy moly, there's another roller out there.
Yeah, but he's going to be going up against Terrence, who is also a fantastic player. He's had really consistent gameplay. It's just unfortunate they have to go up against each other when, they were teammates this past season. I think picking a favorite for this bracket is harder than the last.
I think Corion's going to have a lot of people rooting for him, obviously. He's a player that's been in the scene for many years now. He's one of only 2 veterans in the bracket from the pre-Joseph era, the entire CTWC gold bracket. If I was having to just pick a name, I would probably pick Richie Ruins. His gameplay is just nuts, and I've seen it elevated to another level, at least in the quals.
I'd lean towards Ruins, but I also wouldn't put it past Sam Finch or Corion to have a good run as well. I'd love to see a Corion versus Richie match. I think that'd be amazing.
The first 2 brackets felt crazy, but this one, it's up there with craziness. I mean, you got the number 1 seed Dog facing DMJ. Then you got Quaid versus Laser Monkey, HydrantDude versus Dejan, and Pokenerd versus Guerrero. Yeah, all these guys are rock stars.
Definitely, everyone's going to be saying that Dog's the favorite, but it's likely to see Dog versus Laser. And Laser, he's been rolling, and he had a great showing in 2020 as well. I believe he made it to top 24, if I'm not mistaken. But I think what would be just crazy what is crazy is that we have HydrantDude, the Asian, Pokenerd, and Guerrero all down at the bottom, which are either all really fast tappers or in case of PokeNerd, a roller. And they're all incredibly consistent, especially JerpaDude.
Oh yeah, JerpaDude's been an absolute force. I've mainly been familiar with him through the CTM recaps, where he makes the episode like every other month because of how consistently good he is in that tournament. And then PokeNerd is just like, he's a fantastic example of somebody who was perhaps a lesser known player, middle of the pack last year, kind of squeaked into the CTWC. And then this year, he just took off after he was one of the first people to seriously grind rolling. And he took it very seriously, and the hard work is paying off. He has a very, I don't know if it's unique because Blank shares the foot grip as well, but PokeNerd's foot grip is definitely something that catches a lot of eyes. And I guess it's comfortable for him to do for a while. I would think like my leg would fall asleep doing what he does, but I guess it works for him.
Man, it's just really tough, especially the bottom side of the bracket. JerpaDude versus the Asian, which, the Asian, very strong player. And then PokeNerd versus Guerrero. Like, even though there's like a huge seed disparity, there's still going to be close matches. That's like that's the craziest thing about like the CTWC is that seeds, they don't necessarily determine who's going to win, just determines how unlucky or lucky you are. It's like, oh man, I got to face dog in round 1.
The really interesting matchup to me, it's funny because they're exactly next to each other in seeds. They were right in the middle. It's Quaid and Laser Monkey. It's basically super old school versus super new school. Quaid is the one other veteran in the bracket, aside from Corian, the one person representing the veteran DAS rollers from the... Did I say DAS rollers?
Yes, you did.
He's the one guy representing the early DAS players from, the first couple years of the tournament. He plays with the center well, kind of representing that old-fashioned, like, I do what, works for me against the conventions. And then you have Laser Monkey, who is hopping on all the new trends. Like, he has probably had the fastest progression of any roller, like, ever. He went from, like, 0 to 100 in a single month. He's posting, like, videos near daily on Laser Monkey Tetris on YouTube that blow my mind. Is like, all right, he's one of the top dogs of rolling now too. That's the full spectrum of the history of Tetris, at least competitive NES Tetris in that one match.
If you were to put a name to who would win this bracket, who would it be?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm having to pick someone, of course it's Dog. But yeah, I mean, I see potential for like 5 other 6 names. There's got to be at least one upset this year, I feel like. So could happen at any point.
Yeah, if I were to pick one player that isn't Dog to advance out this bracket, I think it'd have to be JerpaDude, just because of how he can get consecutive maxes or even needed, back-to-back 1.1s in comp. And to have to compete with that level of consistency, the amount of execution that is needed on 18 and 19, it's going to be difficult for his opponents to compete with that. For Group D, we have Sidnev, Tugi, Cheese, Sodium, E-flat, Doge, Huff, and Scotto. Already, you have 4 players that are rolling or have tried rolling and can roll at a pretty good level here in this bracket. You have Cheese, you have Doge, you have Huff, and you have E-flat, which all know how to roll. And I mean, you have Cheese, the one that kind of started this whole entire rolling revolution. That alone already makes it, a bracket of interest. Is like, ooh, there's the guy, who made rolling public. Let's go ahead and, see how he can do.
And then you also got a couple tappers thrown in, and even some dang good DAS players in Scotto, and then Tugi, who he almost got a DAS 1.3 the other month. Another thing that strikes me as fun about this bracket is that, like, there's a couple friendship pairings in here, where, like, I know the players are like friends and they'll have a bit of fun with their match. Like Cheese and Sodium, E-flat and Doge.
Man, it's a really tough bracket because you have Sidnev really has just been popping off recently. In his season of Gauntlet, he went undefeated, the only player in the entire event to go undefeated. And he played up against 1.2 or 1.1 players the entire season. You have him, who also is coming off of a recent victory off against both of the Arteaga brothers.
Yeah, he's a guy Dog is nervous about in CTM, and Dog's not really nervous about too many people. He also just recently got the earliest max out ever. That game, when I watched it, the aggression he had to go on to do that. The guts to go for the final 2 Tetrises to get that earliest max out and then finally get it. It was like the perfect combination of like aggression, smart play, and execution.
Absolutely insane. But of course you have, we already said Huff, a very prominent roller, had a great showing in the Ohio qualifier, or not the Ohio, the WPO qualifiers, showcased how, consistent his rolling is. And of course, I mean, he got 5th seed. So if that doesn't tell you how consistent his rolling ability is, then I don't know what would.
Yeah, Huff was the first person to win a major in-person tournament with rolling. So that kind of kickstarted that era of the rolling revolution. I think it's a fun story that Huff, and Cheese are in this bracket, 2 of the most elite rollers and 2 friends. Huff qualified. He was like the very last person who had serious like main bracket contention, and he could have affected like all the brackets by a ripple effect, because as he was getting maxes, he was like bumping people around. And when he got to his second to last max, he realized or was told that if he put himself 1 notch up, he would be in this bracket with Sidnev and Cheese and like all these other crazy top players. And he decided, you know what? I'm gonna go for it. I want that bracket. I'm gonna get 1 more max.
I think this one's probably the toughest one to predict. Who do you have coming out of this bracket for top 8?
I've just been so impressed with Sidnev in the matches I've watched from him recently. I might go with him. What about you?
I'm leaning towards Huff just because of how consistently he has played. But I wouldn't put it past Sidnev or Cheese to, make it out to top 8. I mean, Cheese and Huff, both previous top 8 contenders. So I think Huff, if not Sidnev or Cheese.
Group E, we got Joseph, Suki, Alex T, Benji, Rhubarb, Valor, Nevinator, and Green Tea.
This is the bracket of death. You have your 2-time champion, Joseph Saelee, in there. Then you have Alex T, one of the faster, younger tappers. Then you have Benji, a phenomenal player in, multiple online events. Rhubarb, also another great player. The coach and, one of the other few DAS players that made it into the event. Valor here. Then you have Nevinator, who shocked everyone with a 6 max qual. And then, of course, you have Green Tea, who I believe he got back 3 back in his qualifier.
He did. And he even pulled off some kill screen theatrics to do it. And then, along with Valor, who for one day had the DAS qualifying world record with 3 maxes and a really high kicker until Quaid nabbed it from him like a day later. But super great showing from Valor, which was cool to see. I know he just missed out on the brackets last year, so it's great to see him in there. Joseph versus Alex T looks like it could very well happen in the second round.
We do have potential for a rematch between Joseph and Green Tea.
Yes, if they make it all the way to the winners finals, or there's a lot of other ways they could meet too. But they both got put in the same bracket, and only one of them could make the top 8. History definitely would be repeating itself if they met towards the end of the bracket.
If you had to choose a player that wasn't Joseph to make it to top 8, who would you pick?
Alex T, he was looking real good on console. He's somebody who's had issues with his console in the past, so he primarily played on emulator for a really long time, and there was questions about how much he'd be able to switch to console before CTWC, if he would even be able to play in CTWC. He managed to get it to work, and I don't think we've really seen him at his full potential, because throughout his qual, his family was throwing drinks and juice boxes and other random stuff all over his desk.
I think I would have to also go with Alex T, but if Alex T doesn't get it, I think it would be someone from the bottom bracket if it wasn't Joseph. So either Rhubarb or who knows, maybe even Green Tea, because even on the past few days that he had been posting on social media, he has shown some crazy, scores where like his top 3 scores are like 998, 997, and 996.
I saw that like the screenshot where it's like 3 just barely missed maxes. I think there's going to be like a lot of people rooting for Green Tea. It's just tough that, every single matchup is going to be the caliber of opponent that he faced with Joseph in 2019 at this point.
For Group F, we have PixelAndy versus Adam MTS, Yeezy versus Asta, Moja versus Blau, and Odin versus Ricardo. I think this bracket might be the most diverse out of all the brackets.
Yeah, although it's unfortunate that the two Germans got a face off. It reminds me of 2019 where Green Tea and SQR, one had to eliminate the other. Although the nice thing here is that Moja and Blau, they'll both get to play another match regardless. It's the nice thing about double elimination. Everybody gets a pretty fair shot to make it far. You get at least 6 full games. A lot of different countries represented here. You got Odin from Iceland, the famous opponent of Jounce from the 1.6, making the news locally. Moja, I've seen videos of his like crazy tapping thing where he does the hyper quick tap that Joseph Saelee talked about doing last year, but I don't think Joseph ended up doing that much.
He does it quite often now, but that's a crazy thing because I know I commentated over Moja's quals, and me and JD both commentated over it, and we're sitting here, we're just seeing how high and how aggressive he was stacking and, just throwing these max outs. And then there was one point when he was on 29 where he got 5 left, and it looked like he was rolling with how fast he moved the piece over. It was just mind-blowing how fast of a tapper he is. I really think that it's going to be interesting coming from his side of the bracket. But, of course, we have Andy, and Andy's just on a whole nother kind of level of competitive up there with his brother.
Yeah. I mean, Andy and Dog, it's like, I feel like they're both a motivating factor for the other to do well. Andy comes in, he's trying to nab the number 1 seed away from, I think it was Fractal at the time, manages to do it, throwing down 11 max outs. I think for everybody, put into perspective how crazy Joseph's run last year was, where he got 12 max outs in quals. That requires almost absolute perfection. PixelAndy played almost flawless, and he fell just short with 11 max outs. But that still, I mean, like, holy moly. Andy, I don't think a lot of people picked to make the finals of CTWC last year. This year, I think a lot of people might pick him.
He's had some insane runs. Of course, his team is coming off a victory from Classic Tetris Gauntlet, where he got 1.3 and was 2,000 points just shy off of 1.3. He ended up losing the Dog by a couple thousand points with a 1.2 million, which is the highest losing score ever so far. I mean, it's just absolutely insane what he's been able to do in comp over the last few months. And coming into this bracket, I think that he is definitely a favorite. However, there's other players in this bracket that can have an outstanding run as well.
Yeah, and then you even have thrown in here at 63rd seed, had to get a max out at the last minute to get in. You got Adam Mountains, who's more well known over in the Classic Tetris PAL scene for racking up the victories in the Classic Tetris PAL monthly tournaments. He didn't compete in CTWC last year because I believe he didn't want to affect up his timings. He was trying to maximize his game with PAL as much as he could, but he's back on NTSC. Good enough to make the brackets, and his reward is facing PixelAndy first round.
Yeah, that's tough, especially with PixelAndy being a really good Daz player himself, too. I think outside of PixelAndy, a player that I would like to see go to top 8 is Moja. I was just really impressed with the way he was able to play during his quals and how fast and how high he can stack and get out of these crazy situations, which made me think a lot about Eric, because, Eric is an incredibly fast tapper and gets out of things that, are crazy. So I would like to see Moja get to top 8 if PixelAndy does not make it.
Group G, Eric ICX, Harry McCrack, Tristop, Miles, Ian, Cobalt, Eren, and Coffee. I know I mentioned the other bracket has a lot of friendships and buds, but oh my gosh, there's going to be some fun times in the VCs, I can tell, from a lot of these matchups.
It's just crazy. You have Miles, who is rolling Tristop, got the first ever 1.3 with Daz. Eric ICX, arguably one of the fastest tappers in the world, who also has added rolling to his arsenal to where he can switch to rolling if necessary. Eren, a player that really popped off quals, got a really strong seeding right there. And then Coffee, who just out of nowhere just dropped a one-off 1.4 before kill screen. Like, I think that's the craziest thing. We think of 1.4s, there's some like kill screen in play. He was one level 29 Tetris or a 28 Tetris, depending on how his numbers were, away from a pre-kill screen 1.4.
He's another player that is finally in the World Championships for the first time. Didn't compete last year. He was hoping to wait until, in-person tournaments. And then he did finally get an in-person tournament to compete in South Carolina, which he stormed through as the qualifier to win a free entry. That was a big factor in him playing this year. So I'm super glad to see him in, perhaps underrated player in the wider scene. And he's going up perhaps another surprise blasting off player in ErenM.
Yeah, and of course you have Ian, who made top 4 in his bracket last year. Miles, top 3 in his bracket last year. Tristop, top 3 in his bracket last year. Eric, top 3 in his bracket last year. They're all like really close to each other in skill. They all have, their own special abilities in terms of Eric being, an incredibly fast tapper, Tristop being a incredibly consistent 18 player. Trying to pick someone to come out of this as top 8 is honestly super, super difficult for me.
So yeah, who are you picking?
I'm leaning in between Tristop and Coffee, with Eric taking a close third. Those would be my top 3 picks.
I think I got to pick Miles. I got to root for the podium to happen.
I'm not sure if he went through. He was talking about getting a max out with all 3 play styles during his qualifier. So
yeah, that's right. He's one of the very few people that could pull that off.
And now for our final group, Group H, we have Fractal, Brighton, Clockworker, Melon Soda, Tetris Time, Longboy, Ben, aka Opox, and Mark. This is also another pretty diverse bracket. Fractal, of course, player that has dazzed, has also tapped, and I believe he's switch gripping with tapping and rolling. And, he got 10 maxes, which, I believe surpassed the first seed by, 2 maxes, which surpassing any like high seed by, even 1 max is just insane. And beating it by 2 maxes means you are just, twice as more efficient with your games. That's just really insane to think about.
Yeah, it was a fun progression to follow. HydrantDude went very first in the week, threw up the bar with 8 maxes plus a high kicker. Richie came along, the second roller to compete. He raised the bar even further with another 8 maxes and even higher kicker. Fractal came along without even rolling, drops 10 maxes, and was about a few seconds away from getting an opportunity for an 11th in his qual.
Also, another player of interest in the top is Clockworker. He was a Daz player. I'm pretty sure he taps now, but he also was able to complete a RNG manip of 19.5 with Daz. That's insane in its own, because he still had to, have perfect placements, perfect skill stops, perfect quick taps in order to complete that, even though it was through RNG manip. Still very impressive to me.
It's a tough performance. It's like playing a tough piano piece. Ben, aka Opox, a player that perhaps, has never been at the forefront of the community, been kind of waiting for that one splashy moment. A top 13 seed. That's phenomenal in this day and age. I think he's somebody that could go far in this bracket.
Oh yeah, definitely. And he's going to be going up against Mark, who, incredibly fast tapper, and over the past 2 years since 2019, he's improved his stacking phenomenally, because the thing was, he tapped fast so he could essentially stack how he wanted and just get out the situations. But now you add that tapping speed with great stacking, you have potential for some insanely high scores, making him a player to look out for. And then you also have Tetris Time, who is an incredibly fast tapper as well, a little bit volatile with how he plays. But if he's hot, he's really hot. Who do you have winning this bracket?
It's going to be really hard to say anybody but Fractal. Fractal, I think a lot of people think may take it all this year. But yeah, I think it'd be really fun to see Opox take this bracket. I'll throw in a dark horse prediction for Opox.
I will be rooting for Opox just because I do want to see him get, his big moment. But Fractal definitely is a safe choice. He got 9th place last year, so top 10 CCWC 2020, and he's definitely looking to, make that, top 10 to at least top 8.
Yeah, and this is definitely the year to do it. He's come so far and has risen to the very top of the scene. It's going to be tough when it comes, to these next 2 weekends. Every single one of these matches I'm going to watch. I'm going to be stuck with both of these open, trying to watch 8 different Tetris games at once.
I think that, even though what we saw last year was incredibly high level, who knows what we're going to see this year with how these players can play.
So Sharky, what are the main things that you've been working on lately?
Currently, I host a Team Tetris format called Classic Tetris Gauntlet Overdrive. Registration for the upcoming season is now live, and we start having our first team matches in December. We are working on a website, have a whole entire production team behind this. We want to essentially bring a little bit more of an esports approach to Tetris. And I think that this upcoming season, we're going to, strive our best to do that.
I'm really glad you're continuing to develop new formats and raise the bar in professionalism with your tournaments. So yeah, for sure, I'll have all the links to Sharky stuff in the description. Be sure to check it out. One last question. Do you know which brackets you're commentating yet?
So I'm commentating PixelAndy's bracket and Fractal's bracket.
Is there any matchup in these two brackets that you're most looking forward to getting to commentate?
I'm looking forward to commentate over Fractal and Opox because they are two team captains for Gauntlet. So, I'm going to be able to root for them and pull out a bunch of crazy stuff that have happened over this past season. And I'm looking forward to commentate over Andy a lot because he's given some of the most insane Tetris stuff I've personally commentated over. And I'm also looking to see, some of the dark horses like Moja. And I'm really, I'm curious to see what he'll be able to do this year.
The bracket starts this Saturday on twitch.tv/Classic Tetris and Classic Tetris 2. I'll be in the audience watching along. I'll be looking forward to hearing you on the mic and seeing all these awesome players throw down. Thanks so much for coming on again, Sharky. 2021 looks like it'll be an awesome year in Tetris once again.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Scout.